All right, here we go live. So it should be popping on any second. You'll see it. Tell me when you see it pop up on the screen.
I do see it.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the More Than Mindset Show. My name is Kim Guillory. I am your host. And today we have Dr. Joni Johnson. I'm going to let her introduce herself. First, I want to tell you a little bit about the show. We are basically real people doing real life, even when it's real hard. And we come on to share our stories and how we've overcome difficulties and how we can help others do the same. We basically speak the story that some people are not speaking up about because they don't feel like they have the right to, or they don't feel safe in doing. And I feel that when we share that, our own experiences, it gives them permission to explore and experience theirs in a different and new kind of way. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I'm going to let you introduce yourself and just a little bit about who you are, what your story is, how did you arrive here at this point, and what you're doing today.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kim, for the opportunity to speak to you and your listeners on your podcast. So this is a wonderful opportunity. I am Dr. Joni Johnson, and I will start off by saying that I'm a learning disabled physician. And I have a long story. We all have a story. But for over 20 years, I have been a military physician. I've been a pediatrician in the Army. This year, I retired after 30 years of service. I retired from the Army Reserves. So also for the last 6 or 7 years, I had my own private practice. And going back to my story, in second grade, I always say I couldn't read. And my brother hates for me to say that I couldn't read, because I really could read, but the issue was that I wasn't hooked on phonics. And so I had a really difficult time reading out loud because I stumbled over words and I didn't really understand what I was reading. The problem that I had, though, was that I am high achieving, and I was high achieving in second grade. And so having two parents who were educators, I would go to school, I wouldn't understand half of what I was learning in school, and I would come home and they would reteach it. And so my grades were amazing. And whenever I asked for help in school, nobody believed that I needed it. And I know that's the story for a lot of kids these days who are high functioning, learning different, because they're struggling, but nobody sees the results of their struggle. So it wasn't until I actually went to medical school that somebody believed that I was struggling. And they believed it because I failed 2 classes, anatomy and histology. And after failing 2 classes, I knew that I was going to be kicked out, and the Army was paying. So I knew I was going to go back to the Army. And my school, which was Albert Einstein College of Medicine, they said to me, if you made it in, we will get you through.
Ooh.
And that was amazing for me. So what they did is they sent me to be tested. And when they tested me, they realized that I had dyslexia and I have a visual convergence insufficiency. So not only did they test me, but they provided me with accommodations. So instead of taking 4 years from medical school, I took 5. They gave me a tutor so that I could retake anatomy and histology. And they provided me with therapy, because by this time I was depressed because I had never failed before. But what I realized from that experience was we're all different. And just because we're different does not mean that we cannot achieve, and that we are all put here for a purpose. And in order to reach our fullest potential, we have to fulfill that purpose. And so in my career as a pediatrician, it started to resonate for me, all of the people that I was seeing, all of the military dependents that I was seeing who were struggling as I had struggled, who weren't getting the answers. And so I made a commitment at that point that I was going to do what my medical school did for me. And so for 6 years, I had a multidisciplinary practice in Stafford, Virginia, where I worked with behavioral health professionals, educational advocates, other medical professionals. And our goal was to diagnose, treat, and support individuals who are like me, who have learning disabilities, ADHD, autism, mood disorders, behavior problems. But it started to bother me after a while, because I realized that I was only providing one piece of that puzzle. And so I was giving people answers. I was helping them to see, oh, this is what's going on with my child. You know, he's not just lazy, or he's not just unmotivated, that there really is something going on that we can do something about. But how did that translate into the home environment? How did that translate into relationships? parents still didn't really know how to parent this child. And the children really didn't know how to be a child in this society or this environment that was not accepting of them. So about a year ago, I closed my practice and I decided that I needed to start coaching because I needed to help those families become advocates for themselves. And I needed them to be able to see themselves outside of how society saw them. Because when you have a neurodevelopmental issue, like a learning issue, learning difference, or ADHD, that means you don't think like everybody thinks. It doesn't mean you're bad or you're wrong. It means you're different. And people who have those differences need to be able to advocate so that they can help others see those differences. So right now, that's what I'm doing. I'm coaching, I'm providing health consultations. So I'm trying to help families, instead of me providing the diagnosis, I'm trying to help families to navigate those systems, not just in getting the right diagnosis and understanding of what's going on, but getting the right support systems and making the right choices for themselves and their families. So that's me in a nutshell. There's so much more I could tell, but we're not going to spend all this time talking about me. I want to be sure to be able to share some of what I have to offer and answer some questions that y'all might
It's so
have.
powerful though, that, because you're advocating for, like, you are the support. So even in sharing the story about yourself, it is so helpful for others to see that it's an opportunity that we all have, regardless of I love the way you say difference, that's because it's really just what it is. And the part that I really want to talk about is where you said we all have like a soul purpose here, and that difference is the purpose. Like,
Absolutely.
so I love going there. I do want to talk about your mission before moving on to that, which was your commitment to advocating
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
that it was done for you.
Right. Well, you know what? Because I think far too often as parents, we give up because we don't know what we're dealing with. And so we're struggling to get our kids to fit some mold and do things the way everybody else does things. That when we can't get them to do what we want to do the way everybody else does it, we feel like, what am I supposed to do? Okay, I'm done. There's just a problem here that I can't overcome. The reality is that there's more than one way, as my mother would say, to skin a cat. I don't know where that came from, but anyway.
We say it too.
We say it all the time, like, what does that mean? There's more than one way to skin a cat. But the bottom line is, just because I don't do math the way you do math doesn't mean I don't know how to do math. Just because I don't see the situation the way you see the situation doesn't mean that we're not both seeing the same situation. And so it's really important for me to not just advocate for that individual, but for those people who are surrounding and supporting. Because if they're not getting the right kind of support, they're not going to be successful. If we don't know how to focus on an individual's strengths, because your purpose is tied to your strength, okay? But sometimes we get so caught up in that weakness and we put all of our energy into that weakness, we don't even realize that weakness is not, it's a distractor. It's not even important. Let it go. Let's just focus on the gift that you were given. And we have to help people to realize that gift. And it's funny, I will tell you, just briefly going back to my story, for a long time, I didn't want to tell my story because I thought that my story in somehow weakened my accomplishments. It somehow made me less than. And then I realized that there was power in my story. People started saying, you're going to really tell that story. And I'm like, no one wants to hear this. But then I started telling the story of my patients when I would do a workshop, or I talk about Johnny, or I talk about Justin. And what I was finding is that there was power in the story. There would be people in the audience who had lost all hope and realized, oh my God, my kid is really okay. I didn't realize that I have a Justin at home and I didn't realize what was going on.
Yeah.
So there's so much power in having the conversation and being authentic and even asking for help if you need to.
Yeah. And, growing the gift is by focusing on the gift, but we're so caught up in focusing on the thing we don't want to see, or the negativity, or the weakness, like you said, instead of the strength. But that's the shift. That's the mindset shift that coaching can offer,
That is the shift. Not what you can't, but what you can. I'm just going to tell you 2 seconds of story. I have a 13-year-old patient, has autism, level 3, significantly impaired by his autism, doesn't communicate very well, has sensory issues, doesn't like people around him, but likes to touch. Has to be homeschooled because of his sensory issues in school. He's a phenomenal baker. And about 2 years ago, I had an autism event, and he made, through his bakery, which he owns, it's an LLC. At 13, he made all the cookies for my autism event. That is a family that said, yes, he's got some challenges, and we are working through those challenges, and we will deal with them. But he was put here to bake some cookies.
So good.
Those were the most phenomenal cookies. And I was tripping out. He's 13, level 3 autistic, and owns a bakery. You know, his parents thought about what he can and de-emphasized what he can't.
That's it. That's the secret.
That's the secret. Truly, that's the secret. And he's bringing so much joy because of that.
And so the opposite is our first response, typically, is if it's uncomfortable, if it feels like they're making trouble or it's inconvenient, we pull them out of the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's actually, we're the ones who are not taking our place when we do that.
Mm-hmm.
In
Right.
the uniqueness, because the thought, we don't fit in, they don't fit in.
Right. And it becomes uncomfortable. You know, you and I were talking a few minutes ago about homeschooling, and I was saying, I don't really like homeschooling. And I had to clarify that, because it's not the concept of homeschooling that I don't like, but it's an easy way out. And far too often, when situations become uncomfortable for our children in a public school or private school environment, it becomes so uncomfortable that we just don't want to be there anymore. You know, we feel like we're hurting our children to keep them in that environment. But it's through discomfort that we have growth. And so when we pull them out, they're uncomfortable because they're struggling socially. But we'll never teach them to be comfortable socially if we pull them out of the one place where they can learn how to get over some of those obstacles. It's funny, as you were just talking, I thought about Representative John Lewis. And if you watch any TV channel in the last, whatever, John Lewis just passed away. He was part of the civil rights movement. But one of his mantras was, we have to find a way to get into trouble. We have to find a way to get in the way. We've got to get into good trouble. So we got to get into trouble, but we've got to get into good trouble. We are indoctrinated to believe that if my child gets sent to the principal's office, he's in trouble. That's not good. I don't want him labeled as the bad kid, so I'm just going to remove him from that environment. But I see that as good trouble, because you know what? There's a reason he got sent to the principal's office. Let's think about what happened. And I will tell you another story of a patient real quick. I had another teenager got sent to the principal's office every afternoon. I don't know, maybe 2:00, same time, every afternoon, because he couldn't take it in the classroom anymore. And he got up and he walked out. He was known to have autism, but again, he wasn't following the rules. He's walking out. They're about to suspend him. And I said, wait a minute, let's figure out why he's walking out the same time every day. The answer was, it was hot. It was hot.
He was taking care of himself.
We gave him, he got into good trouble because that allowed us to realize that he has sensory issues to heat. We gave him a fan on his desk that he could operate when he needed it, and he stayed in the classroom. So not all trouble is bad trouble.
So
that sometimes allows us to take the time to figure out what's going on with our children. And that's what we need to do.
There's my permission for all that trouble I made in school and how many visits I went to the office and how many classes I got kicked out. Like, I needed to experience that to have this conversation.
That's right. But see, what we probably didn't do when you got kicked out is we didn't see it as a sign that there was something behind that. There was a reason for that. Instead, we just provided discipline. We're quick to provide discipline instead of support.
And elimination. That's the hard one, because if you're eliminating from the classroom, you're eliminating from society. Like, they lose their place, but they lose their place because of the elimination, not because of, like, we got to kind of own it. Like, that's the message I would like the parents to know, is that all of us, the differences, whatever it is, like, we need the Skittles. How
Yeah,
boring would it be if we were all the same?
right. But we also lose an opportunity for those around us to grow,
Yeah,
right?
agreed, agreed.
Those around us to recognize that everybody is not like you. And
Yeah,
I can learn something from the gifts that you bring to this classroom that I will never have an opportunity to learn from if
that's
we
right.
eliminate you and send you home.
You lose all the gratitude, all the appreciation for things that come so naturally, for all of it. Like I
Yep,
100% love that.
absolutely. Absolutely. What else you have
So
for
good.
me?
What else I got for you? So I want to I want to talk about the variance of normal. I love
Okay.
you bringing that up, and how can we plug that in for the parents, like to be able, or even if it's them themselves, maybe it's not even a parent or a child, maybe it's the actual individual, the adult who is struggling with a difference, that has been labeled as a deficiency or a, how would we say, a diagnosis of,
Disability. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like you. I hate that.
Yeah.
I
Hate
just,
the word disability.
it's so, it just doesn't feel good, but I get it. It's a way that we can differentiate or, be able to explain. But so I like the way that you put it earlier is you talked about the variance of normal, which in my, the way I would phrase it is the Skittles.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear you talk on that.
So, the issue I have is with this term labels, and you said it a couple times. Um, the word label itself doesn't bother me, but I recognize how it's received by parents. They see certain diagnoses like ADHD or autism or learning disabilities as this label that society has placed on their children that says you are bad, you are not as good as.
Yeah.
And the reality is first off, what I tell parents all the time is labels can only be placed by the manufacturer. Okay. So if you go to the store and you buy a dress, it's the manufacturer that puts a label on to give you information. Well, I don't know about you, but I wasn't born with an instruction sheet or a label. So what that says to me is I don't have to accept whatever society wants to put on me. Okay. They're not my creator. They don't know anything about me and they don't know anything about the gifts that I have to offer or the purpose for my being here. And so, first thing we do to empower folks is to let them know, let the label go. A diagnosis, which is similar to labels, is information.
Love
Again, it's
that.
our mindset. It's our mindset. A label is unimportant, not necessary. A diagnosis is important. It is necessary because it provides information that I otherwise didn't have. Now, once I get that information, it's what I do with it, it's how I allow myself to be empowered by it that determines how important it is. When I look at the label called autism, or I look at the label called ADHD, what that says to me is I'm not looking at it negatively, I'm looking at it positively. I call it a diagnosis. And when I look at individuals who have neurodevelopmental issues like ADHD or autism or learning differences, they're just that. They're differences. And it bothers me that society says you're somehow wrong.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, based on my experience working with individuals, they are not wrong, they are different. So in my mind, they're a variation of normal. And I would love for society to move their thinking and their mindset from thinking that ADHD and autism and learning differences are wrong to they are normal. It's just a variation. You may be here on the normal variation and I may be here, but we are all normal. We all have something to offer. And just because I do things differently, there is power in my difference. And I want to be recognized for that power. And I want to be allowed for my power to shine. And when I look at individuals with autism, for example, yes, they have some severe weaknesses. But you know what? They've got some amazing
Yeah.
strength. That's how autism is built, right? That's how ADHD is built. And I've said to a lot of my parents, if I could buy ADHD, I'd buy it in a heartbeat. I would buy it in a heartbeat. Because you know what? Everybody who's listening, when we're done with this conversation, I want you to Google. I want you to Google Fortune 500 CEOs, 100 autism. 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 100 autism with autism, and
Mm.
Fortune 500 CEOs or entertainers or athletes
Yeah.
with ADHD. What you'll notice if you look at that list is the people that are leading in their industry have what? They either have ADHD or they have autism or they have both.
Because they
So
focused,
I'm
huh?
sorry. How can that be bad? Right? It's our mindset. It's our
Yep.
perspective.
It's
It's
the
our
focusing on the strength. Like, this is what I'm good at, and I'm like absolutely the best at, and I'm going to focus just on that, leave the rest behind, and lead the way.
exactly.
So good.
Exactly. And parents just really, if a parent can adopt that mindset, then it will translate to their children. It's got to start with the parent. You've got to believe. The other thing I always say is D equals diploma, because parents will always come in and say, my son is failing math or whatever. Okay, you know what? The math ain't his thing. If he's failing math is not for him. He's not going to be a mathematician. D equals diploma. Get him out so that he can go do what he wants to do. He can go live in his strength. Okay. So we as parents have got to recognize my child is different and maybe I can't have straight A's. Maybe they were built for straight A's and go for it. But not everybody is, and that is really okay.
But like you're saying that, but it's like being built for straight A's. There are places that they are weak at, but they use that strength and show that. And because we focus on that, we see that they personally can't see where the weakness is and they never work on it. I work with so many people who were all that in school. They can't translate it into business and success and being able to relate with other people and serve.
Right.
They because that was so highlighted that they never had to work. That was what was accepted.
Mm-hmm.
They got to hide their
Yeah.
weaknesses. But when we're talking of these diagnoses, there's no hiding it, right? So
Right.
it's shown as a weakness, but there's, oh my God, this is so good. I hope
Right.
you guys who are listening and watching are kind of getting these moments also. So whenever let's talk about taking that to the other side. So
Okay.
this goes to, and I want to make sure I say it right. The way I ask my questions is sometimes confusing. So just ask me if I don't say it the right way. So I'm thinking of, we want to compensate and we don't want them to feel bad, right? As the parents or as the whatever. And so we go swing into the other side, which is you are special. You're so lucky that you're so different. And it's not believed. So
Mhm.
it's said, kind of like when your house burns, they tell you you're so fortunate because you lived. And I'm like, yeah, that's because you have a house, right?
Right.
So you have someone who's ADD or ADHD or autistic, and you're like, oh, you're special. God made you special. That's why you're lucky enough to, they don't feel that. Like it's almost like the fairy tale story, which actually prevents them from getting the growth, right?
Right.
Would you say
Right.
that there's a swing there?
Well, it's because people see it as all or nothing. And it's the same on both sides. Either you're all broke or you're all good. And the reality is nobody is all broke and nobody is all good. We are all living somewhere in the middle. And so it's about truth. It's about honesty. It's about authenticity. And as a parent, we got to be honest with our kids. We can't say, oh, Johnny, it's really okay. You're just so smart as they're failing.
You're so much better than those others. Like,
Right.
that's what we do.
Those grades don't mean anything. Okay, they do. Okay, come on now. Take the blinder off. The grade does mean that you struggle in math. I'm not saying that, it's okay to struggle in math. It's realistically, math is not your thing, Johnny.
Yeah.
You got an F. That F doesn't define you. It doesn't mean you are a failure. It means you're struggling in math. Math, this isn't your thing. So we're going to do the best we can do in math, but we're not going to focus on it. You do great over here. Let's focus over here. The kids, to be honest, don't ignore those things that they are not so great at. Let's address it head on. Let's be honest about it. Let's be authentic. But let people know that doesn't define you. Just because you're not good there, that doesn't define you. If it's something you want, if math is something you value and you got an F in it, then we got to work on it. If math isn't something you value, we're going to do the best we can do We have to pass because that's what the rules are. We're going to pass and we're going to move on. So we don't want to give that false sense of anything. You know, we don't want to lift you up to make you believe you're something you're not. But we also don't want to tear you down to believe that having ADHD or autism is that you're not good, that you're not. It means, you know what, you struggle to focus. So what can we do to help you focus better so that you can do the things you really want to do and that you were gifted to do? So, I mean, it's not an all or nothing. And I think that's what parents need to say to their kids. They need to live it in their experience because that's the reality. That's the world that they're going to enter in. And if we as a parent don't identify those areas that are weaker, somebody else will for their child.
Yeah, I love that. It's living the experience, not just talking it, not just saying it, but actually being it with other kids, with wherever you are, and not pulling them out of it. And that's how you're showing them that they're different. Like, oh, we can't go there, we can't do that because we're different, right? It's kind of like we can't go to college. You know, people who live in this neighborhood can't go to college. That's not available for us. Or, you know, we can't wear that kind of clothes or have that kind of car. That's taught. That's learned behavior. It's so limited. And you know, the same thing with the special. I see this in ball also, right? So you're playing, you have one team that goes to the World Series, not now. I mean, how many teams get a ring? So we don't want someone else to feel bad. Then they don't grow. And now we have a handicapped society, not because they're handicapped, but because we didn't want them to feel uncomfortable and we didn't allow them to grow.
Well, you're not always going to win. And I will tell you, in my life, the most important moments were not when I was a winner, but when I lost. The most important moments was when I failed. Mm-hmm. Failing is the greatest opportunity you can offer to anyone. Now, let me tell you, it doesn't feel good. I mean, I'm not saying I want to fail. I'm not saying I want to look, you know, I'm not trying to wish all the badness on me right now. But the point is, that's life. You can't avoid it. So when it happens, and hopefully it doesn't happen a lot, but when it happens, we have to look at it positively, take it as an opportunity. And we have to teach our kids, hey, there's nothing wrong with losing and there's nothing wrong with failure because it's from those places that we will elevate. And that's what this is about. Let's elevate.
Let's elevate.
Yep.
Love it. Let's talk about, I see your book behind you. So let's talk about your book.
Oh, see, you know what? Okay, can I tell you about the J?
Yeah.
This is a J.
Yours. Tell us what's happening behind the blue eyes cover.
So this is my J that I have 3 J's in my name. So I created this J to like hang all my stuff on, you know, my little board. And so as I was setting up this Zoom conference, I've noticed that, you know, everybody on Zoom these days, they have all their stuff behind them. They set up these nice, you know, like if you go on CNN or MSNBC or Fox or whatever you watch, if somebody's written a book, it's like behind them. So I was talking to my daughter and I was like, where do I put my book? Like, you know, where can I go where my book can be behind me? Because I normally forget to have it out there. And she said, just hanging on the J. So it's hanging on the J because it's a small book. It's less than 100 pages because I said I'm a learning disabled physician and I don't like to read. So I'm one of those people that will be honest and tell you I don't like to read and I don't read. And I wrote this book, I think in 2018, and I just read it myself like 6 months ago because I would always start it and then it not that it was boring, but my eyes started to hurt and everything. So I would put it down. But this is really my story. And I have a couple chapters in here. I think it's maybe, 8 chapters, but from each chapter is a part of my story and my educational journey. So it's not my whole story, but it's my educational journey. And it talks about my successes and my failures, how I learned that I was learning disabled or learning different. But also every chapter has a story of one of my patients. And so it has a story of my patients would go from 18 months to adults. And so different stories of their experiences. And the point behind the book again is it's called My Blue Eyes. And I'll tell you where that came from. Whenever I give a talk, I talk about perspective. because it's really important when you're sharing your views that people know like where you're coming from. And so I always talk about something called blue-eyed syndrome. And basically it's a syndrome that I created. But it's to emphasize that blue eyes are the least common eye color. So I think it's like 6%, 8% of people worldwide have blue eyes. But when we look at somebody with blue eyes, normally we find them to be stunning. We normally look at blue eyes as being extremely beautiful. But when you think about it, they're atypical because they only occur 8% of the time. So really, when you're looking at someone with blue eyes, you're looking at someone as different as someone who has autism or ADHD. The difference between blue eyes and autism is only that you can see them. Everybody can see it. And so even though they're very atypical, people are accepting of it because they can see them and they can become comfortable with it. But when you have a neurodevelopmental issue, a learning disability, autism or ADHD, your beauty is just as beautiful as blue eyes. But because people don't see it, because what they see are challenging behaviors, or they see somebody who's running around, or they see somebody who can't understand what was read in the class, they're not as accepting as an individual with blue eyes. So the point of the title is to change someone's perspective, to appreciate that just because you're atypical, like having blue eyes, doesn't mean that you're not beautiful and that you don't have something positive to offer. So that's what My Blue Eyes is all about. And that's what the book is about. And if you want to read it, it's on Amazon. It's
We'll link all that in the
$9.99.
show notes. Love that. I like that perspective. So I'm thinking, like, this brought up for me is, so where do they start in just finding the strengths? Like, because we are so, just the human condition, right, is so focused on pointing out the weakness, even in our own bodies, in our own self, in our own backgrounds, right? Or like all of that is the first thing that we notice. And so we think other people notice, but then we bring so attention to it that we actually create more of it. So I want to talk about one more thing after this too. And that's, that will save space for you guys if you have questions. And so first it's how can we give this some tangible stuff to start looking for? Because habit and behavior, it's going to be abnormal for them to go and look for that, right? When they've been so trained to look at what society looks at. How do we help the parents start looking for these positive traits and these strengths? And, at an early age even, and later, because let's say they're 13 now or they're 8 now, it's been a while, because what is it, like 6 to 9 years we hypnotized them to believe the way we believe. So that's going to be treated differently, right? How we treat the one under 9 and then the one over 9. So could you speak to that?
So you identify strengths by considering value. And value is a really important word when it comes to kids, because kids will always do what they value and what they enjoy. And they will steer away from things that they don't value or that they don't enjoy. Now, that doesn't mean they can't do it well. I'm not talking about what they do well, okay? They may read really well, but they may not like to read, They may do math really, really well, but they may hate doing math. So the key is for a parent, when there are behaviors, to not be so quick to discipline the behavior. And that doesn't mean you never discipline. But what that means is you understand first. You understand what's going on behind this behavior first. And then we want to think about what's important. And yes, what's important for me as a parent, but that's not as important as what's important for you as the child. And if we really want to give space to develop strengths in our children, yes, they need to do the things that they have to do as being part of a family or part of a household or whatever, whether that's chores or whatever. But we still need to leave space for the things that they enjoy and for the things that they value. And sometimes we'll never know that if we don't ask.
Yeah.
And we'll never know that if we don't provide an opportunity. So from my perspective, as a parent saying, I want to do this, but I don't know how, take a step back when things are going not the way you want them to go. Breathe, think about what's really going on here. And especially if you have an older child, ask the question. Even autistic kids always know what they want to do and how they want to do it. It's just we don't know how to communicate
Oh,
effectively with
so
them
good.
to give them the space to tell us. And that's a whole nother conversation about how to communicate. But the key to communicating is, one, never use the word why. And we do it all the time.
Hate that word.
Never say, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? Because it puts you on the defensive. So never ask a kid why, but show concern. What's going on here? What was this about? Your room's a mess. Thought we were gonna clean up. What's that about? They'll always be able to tell you. And if you take the time to think about it, it'll make sense. And I got a lot of stories that I could tell to demonstrate that, but I won't. But that's the thing. Take a break, take a step back, think about the behavior, where the behavior is coming from. If it all else fails, ask the question, and value. Give your child an opportunity and the space to do what they value, even if it doesn't look like they do it well, to do what they enjoy and what they value. I hope that helps.
So good. Yeah, it's so good. We have a couple of retired teachers on the call I'm looking at, and I'm sure they're relating to this, because they were 30 years in the classroom, they saw this.
Yeah.
And so now let's talk about, that's where they were born into it. Let's talk about where they've been conditioned into it, where they saw the behavior through a sibling, through a spouse, through a parent, or where they've just been in the environment of it, because we're talking two different,
right.
Treating it differently. And I know we have both, because we lack in education. We lack in awareness. We just haven't been exposed to the information. And, I was saying this earlier today, it's like scientists have really been doing a lot of work in the lab, but they hadn't really been bringing it to the front line to let us know what they're finding. Now they're starting to do that. So really what we're learning about the brain, how we were born into it or how we've been conditioned into it, either way, we can do something about it. We have options. That's the power.
Yeah.
So could you speak to that for the ones who they're experiencing their child having learning differences, or even behavioral problems that's coming from what they are seeing in their environment and how they're reacting to it?
Right. So the first thing that I want to share is all these things we're talking about. These are neurodevelopmental issues, which means you're born with it. What that also means is they run in families. Okay. So if you have a child with ADHD, there's probably a parent who has ADHD. They may not be diagnosed, but probably, or there's a sibling, or there's somebody. So that fact makes it really difficult. Okay. So if you've got mother, dad, one child, you're seeing behaviors that are being exhibited that you're uncomfortable with, always take notes, pay attention, track whatever you can track. Because the more information you can bring to the table, the easier it is for us to understand, is this something that's inherent or is this something that's conditioned? As you're tracking, as you're paying attention, pay attention to what other people in the family are doing. Are they doing the same thing? When are they doing, exhibiting this behavior? Under what circumstance? So the key to remember is, because neurodevelopmental issues can run in families, there is an opportunity that if you have a parent who has, an ADHD or an autism or a learning issue, that there's a good chance that it's going to be passed down. Not always, but there's a good chance. So you want to take it seriously, and you want to get an evaluation. Now, the other piece of the puzzle is the conditioned behavior. We don't want to just assume because we have one child who has autism, and maybe it runs in our family because it is neurodevelopmental. When we have a younger child, that younger child who's exhibiting similar behaviors is automatically autistic. Maybe because they run in families, but there is something known as conditioning. So I see my older brother, rocking. And I think, hey, that's what I'm supposed to do because Joey rocks. So I'm going to start rocking too. Joey rocks for a reason. It's a sensory process. That's why Joey rocks. Well, maybe the younger son, maybe he has the same sensory issue, or maybe I'm just seeing Joey doing it. And because I see Joey doing it, I'm going to do it as well. Well, it comes back to understanding. And if you have an older child, a child old enough who maybe is exhibiting a behavior later on in life where they can tell you, you can ask the question, well, what's that about? Because sometimes kids will see, well, when Joey does this, he gets that. And I want that. So I'm going to do the same thing because I want the same result. And so, again, if a child has gone to those extremes, oftentimes they can articulate in some way that that's why they're modeling that behavior. Sometimes they're not sophisticated enough to do that. But the key is that you want to inquire. You don't necessarily want to discipline. You don't necessarily want to try to tell them they're wrong in exhibiting the behaviors. And I know the concern is probably more severe or serious than just rocking. Maybe we're breaking things, or we got really challenging behaviors that we just as a parent want stopped. But again, the key is to just pay attention to it. See if it's the exact behavior that's being modeled from another older sibling. And then see if there's an end game, a goal that's trying to be accomplished, that the younger sibling is trying to accomplish. The other thing that I'll say is rarely, even though ADHD and autism run in families, the old saying that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism stands. So it is very rare that even siblings with autism will have the same characteristic behaviors, right? It doesn't work that way, okay? And that's the problem oftentimes, and that's oftentimes how parents will miss autism in a sibling,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I could see that.
Right, because they'll say, he can't have autism because I know my older son has autism. He's been diagnosed and he doesn't do anything that my oldest son does. Okay, well, because no two people with autism are going to be exactly the same. So when you see the exact behavior, you probably are getting some modeling of behavior as opposed to there truly being, another neurodevelopmental issue. But again, you just have to pay attention to it. You have to question it, ask the questions, see if it's the exact behavior. And then if all else fails, you want to get a diagnosis. You want that information. Again, not the label. You want the information. Because again, the more informed you are, the better you can advocate and the better support you can provide.
It's so interesting. I'm thinking, as you're talking about when with the rocking, like, so the mind is so fascinating. I'm a hypnotherapist and we discover so much of these beliefs that have been conditioned. And I'm thinking of the child who the sibling got a band-aid, for something that happened. And, everyone gave the sibling the love, and their mind was, I need to be sick so that I can get love. And have their life, like we're finding them 40, 50, 60 years later, still, being sick, still having all these ailments and stuff because of that conditioning, that understanding, that rocking, as we would call it in this. But this is so good. I hope you guys are enjoying this as much as I am. The first time we talked, I was like, oh my God, you're so my soul person here. We're going to have a conversation and keep this going. So let us know in the Q&A and chat if you have anything to inquire about and if you have any specific questions before we hop off. And then we're going to leave time for you to ask questions and come on live if you want to after we kill the live video from YouTube. So Robin has a question for you. She said, what do you think about IEPs that include reduced assignments, extended time, extra help from an IS tutor, etc.?
Oh, okay. I love IEPs actually. The idea there's a difference between an IEP and a 504 plan. So for those of you who may be on who don't know what IEP stands for, it's Individualized Education Plan. The idea behind an IEP is for a student who truly learns differently, okay? So maybe has a learning difference. A 504 plan is for a student who just needs accommodations in order to perform on par with everyone else. So someone, for example, with ADHD has the capability to do the work as it is presented, but they may need more time, or they may need to sit at the front of the class to not be distracted. That's a 504 plan. So an IEP is saying to me that this is a student who has been identified as truly needing to be accommodated in order for them to be successful. And I champion that and I applaud that. It's not, and it should not be a stigma. So having an IEP should not make anyone feel like they are less than. It is a recognition of the school saying, you learn differently than how we are taught to teach. And let's not forget, there are 8 different learning styles, okay? Schools only teach to 3. So audio, visual, and kinesthetic. Those are the 3 learning styles. So if you need one of the other 5 learning styles in order to be successful, it's through the IEP that they can provide that accommodation to present you with information in a way in which you can actually take it in and learn from it. So I champion it. I think it is the most positive thing out there. And recognize as a parent, it's there not saying your child needs all of these things at all times. It's saying these are the accommodations that we recognize that your child may need at any time to be successful. And we are willing to do these things. So that doesn't mean that you always have to take advantage of them. You take advantage of the ones that are going to be most appropriate in that situation. But it's really an opportunity for your child to be able to be successful and to be taught the way in which their brain needs to receive the information. So I'm for it. I had one in medical school. I wouldn't be here right now as a doctor if I didn't have the equivalent of an IEP.
Okay, well, I want to know what's the other 5.
Oh,
It's like, okay,
well,
so we have
that'll be
we have
another conversation. Do you want me to tell you?
I do, yeah.
Oh, okay. So let's see if I can remember all 5 off the top of my head. So there's audio, visual, kinesthetic. There's analytic and analytic
That's
learner.
me.
Yeah, that's the kid that asks why all the time. Gets on your nerves asking why. There's a naturalistic learner. They need to sit by a window or they like to be outside. There's an intra. Let's see, now you put me on the spot.
That's okay. No. I mean, I get it. You don't have to.
Different ones. I can't remember the name of them now, but there's one where you learn better in groups. There's intro and intra. One where you learn better by yourself. And then there's another learning style where you learn better in groups.
Yeah,
and that's important because we do a lot of group work. So if you're one of those people that don't learn well in groups, but we force you into a group, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah,
and that's only
so good.
7.
What about experiential? You have to actually feel like you have to actually. There's got to be something to that because I'm so that person.
That's the kinesthetic. That's the one that's got to get in it, touch it, feel it, experience it, actually work the information in order for it to be cemented. So that's the kinesthetic learner.
I definitely understand because I teach in this way, just in the work that I do. It's like analytically experiential process, and for sure it's like I was a doodler, even in massage school. Like I sat on the floor, I wasn't even in a seat, and I have a notebook full of beautiful artistry. I mean, not beautiful, but like these colors because I need to be busy in order for my brain to receive. So I'm just curious if that's
musical, I think is the last one. The musical. That's the one that makes noise. Well, but you know what? And the thing is, and I may have gotten some of those wrong, so don't hold me.
It's fine.
Don't hold me to it. But the point is I had a lot of my patients were musical learners, and through that IEP, we were able to get them permission to have an earpod or an AirPod in their ear during class, and they would listen to like a metronome, and they would listen to certain music that allowed them to be able to focus. So the key is these are real things, Yes. I mean, to be able to, we're always telling kids, no, we don't want you to sit by the window. The ADHD kid, you can't sit by the window because you'll be distracted by what's going on outside. But if you have ADHD and you're a naturalistic learner, by all means, you've got to sit by the window because it's the sunshine. It's being able to see the trees that's allowing you to focus more on the material that's being presented. So those learning styles are so important. And it's the IEP that allows the schools to go beyond those 3 learning styles to really accommodate the student so that they are set up for success.
Thank you so much for asking that. And that is for sure our future conversation, the learning style. And I want to hear that because I think it's so important, especially right now. There are so many who are going to be homeschooling with the COVID, all this stuff going on. And I feel like they would really want to know this, this information for themselves. And could you come back to the topic where you said in the cases where the homeschooling is not the great idea because it's the easy way, could you speak to the homeschooling mom that, like, what would they do? Because they're sitting here like, okay, I don't want to ruin my kid, right? Because that's the first thing we think. But where would you lead them to help put their kid in the discomfort in order to learn? Like, how could we frame that in a way where they could actually, because it is just the mom thing, right? We want them to be, we don't want, it hurts when our kid hurts. Like, so
Right.
we think we're helping them.
Well, there are co-op programs. So there are a lot of different ways that you can homeschool. And so when you have a child who has social anxiety, the worst way to homeschool that child is to keep them in their home, in their room, and to have no social contact. But you can do homeschooling through a co-op program. And what that means is, you are essentially in the home environment, but yet sometimes homes will share curriculum. So this homeschool mom will teach English and this homeschool mom will teach math. And then sometimes co-ops will even offer some of your specials, like, we'll go to the sport and fitness and do gym, or we'll go to this, place and do art. The idea is, yes, homeschooling provides a different environment, which may be the environment your child needs to be in. So that's why I'm not saying I don't like them, but if you have a child who has social anxiety, they need the socialization that they would get from a
Yeah.
regular school environment. And we don't want to forget the social piece at the expense of
Yeah.
the academic piece. That social piece is just as important. So if you're gonna homeschool, that's perfect, that's fine, but don't forget the social piece. Join a co-op so that they can still learn how to get along with other kids. And they even have co-ops with kids that are like them. So autistic kids do much better with other autistic kids. They see the world similarly. So if you're going to do a co-op, it's okay if you want to do a co-op that has other autistic kids in it, as well as typically developing kids, as they say, because you want to be able for them to build a community. And so they want to be with kids that they can relate to, so you can find that in a homeschool co-op program.
All right. So are there any, oh, here's a question. What about parents who are in denial about their child's abilities and expect them to take classes that the child is unable to do, even with modifications, which causes extreme stress for the child? You can tell who our teachers are, right? And
Yeah.
I think Robin's still doing tutoring, even though she's retired. So this is probably very helpful.
So that's where coaching comes in. And that's where the parent really needs to be coached on setting realistic expectations. We are not going to help our children by pushing them into situations where we're just setting them up to fail.
Mm-hmm.
But this is also, and I'm just going to say this, where the genetic link comes in. Remember I said learning disabilities, ADHD, autism, these are neurodevelopmental issues that you're born with, and they typically run through the family line, right? Oftentimes I have found that the greatest pushback I get are from parents who are also either on the spectrum or have ADHD themselves. And they had their own struggle that they are putting on to their children.
Agreed.
And so it's important for them to enter coaching, because oftentimes we got to do some work for the parent. We have to support and advocate for the parent. And there are many times that I've had to say to the parent, I'm taking a holiday and helping your child will be fine. I'm gonna spend my time working with you right now, because if I can't get you straight, your child is gonna kind of be doing.
That's the thing. Even, with coaching, even in partnerships, it's like when we're helping one it's like that entanglement, entrapment, whatever
Mhm.
that happens in there. I love that you're saying that, because when we're referring to like coaching, we're talking about awareness.
Mhm.
Coaching is the ability to be able to see the things that you create yourself through your
Right.
thoughts, through your work. Like, that awareness is, gosh, that's game changer for healing, for learning, for
Right.
everything.
And that's why coaching is better than therapy in this situation, and that's why I left my practice. I had, social workers and professional counselors in my practice who were great, but I was saying they couldn't connect because sometimes we don't need people telling us what we need. We need someone to help us to figure it out for
See,
ourselves.
that's 100%.
And
Love
and
that.
that and it's hard to get the parent to be willing to do that. But again, if you frame it in, we've got to figure out a way to do what's best for your child. So let us take some time to figure that out together. And then you use that to get them to start doing some work on themselves.
This has been so good. I want to read this last comment and then I'm going to take us off of the live on YouTube and then we'll be able to hang out here for a second if anyone has questions. But Peggy said this was so good. It brought so much information to light. I'm someone who struggled all through school, was moved from a regular class to the dummy class, had very few teachers who were willing to make accommodations for me to experience some success. But by some deep longing, I managed to get into a career opportunity program right out of high school. I wanted to teach, and this gave me the hands-on experience and opportunity to go to college. I went on to graduate with a bachelor's, with a BA, and went on to grad school and received a master's in education. Don't be shortcutting me now. 5 years later, I had a depressive experience and was hospitalized where I had extensive testing. The psychotherapist came in to chat with me and gave me the results. Oh my God, I was a table severe learning disabled, dyslexic, and overachiever. I wish all parents and educators could hear what you are saying. This is so needed. Thank you for sharing your story and doing what you're doing for these amazing kids.
Thank you, Peggy.
That's why we do this. This is why we show up.
God. See, your story should be in my book. Peggy, I'm expecting a book. Write a book because people need to hear your story. That is amazing.
We've been telling her that. She's one of the coaches trained in my program. And it's really, this is it. We learn it, we figure it out, we share it, we hold the space for it, and we quit hiding in the shame behind it. And we quit hiding our children, and we quit hiding our weaknesses, and we show off our strengths. We come out with that stuff and we focus on what we want to create more of. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
We're doing this again.
Okay. We're going to talk. I'm going to come back and we're going to talk effective communication using love languages and learning styles. That's what we're going to talk about next time. Because you're right. So that's important.
Love languages and learning styles.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. I'm stopping the live stream so that I can officially move the video over.